Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Chandna.
And I'm Diksha Bisla, and on the show today, US President Donald Trump has issued a warning to the Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying that there will be severe consequences if he does not agree to stop the war. I'm going to get you all the details on that front on the show today. Stay tuned.
Also on World DNA, the Israeli military has now approved a new framework for an expanded ground offensive in the Gaza Strip. The IDF says that the campaign will continue until all hostages are freed and Hamas is dismantled. This and a lot more lined up for you right here on the show. Let's start with that.
Israeli military says its air defenses successfully intercepted a ballistic missile launched from Yemen, which did not set off warning alerts.
What will there
will be consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
Donald Trump warns of very severe consequences if Vladimir Putin doesn't agree to stop the Ukraine war after Friday's summit. Says he would take a follow-up meeting off the table if he felt Putin was acting in bad faith.
Media reports citing two European officials claim that Donald Trump tells European leaders during a call that he does not intend to discuss any possible divisions of territory when he meets with Putin in Alaska this week.
Again, we think the Democrats will not do anything to stop crime, but we think the Republicans will do it almost unanimously. So we're going to need a crime bill that we're going to be putting in, and it's going to pertain initially to D.C.
Donald Trump calls on his fellow Republicans in Congress to pass a crime bill extending the 30-day limit on federal police control in Washington, adding that he could declare a national emergency if lawmakers don't act.
Lebanese leaders reject any efforts at foreign interference during a visit by Iran's security chief. Prime Minister Aoun says Beirut wouldn't tolerate neither tutelage nor diktat after Tehran voiced opposition to plans to disarm Hezbollah.
In Serbia, clashes erupt between anti-government protesters and supporters for a second day in a major escalation after more than 9 months of persistent demonstrations against President Alexander Vučić.
At least 26 migrants die as two boats sink off the coast of Italy's Lampedusa island, with around 10 others still missing. Now around 60 people were rescued after the sinkings in the central Mediterranean.
Bitcoin hits a new all-time high, soaring past $124,000, driven by a broad surge in risk appetite and a soaring US stock market, marking its latest milestone in a bull run fueled by institutional demand.
NBA approves the sale of Boston Celtics to a group led by private equity mogul Bill Chisholm. The deal values the franchise at more than $6.1 billion, the largest for a sports team.
The first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be.
Trump is motivated by the feeling he may yet win a Nobel Peace Prize.
US president has issued a warning to the Russian president, saying that there will be severe consequences if he does not agree to stop the Ukraine war.
This is after Friday's summit in Alaska.
Face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
there will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
Well, Trump's remarks came after his meeting with the European leaders. He rated the meeting 10 out of 10 and said that he is not the one who kept Zelensky away from the Alaska meeting.
$1 trillion in extra spending.
We had a very good call. He was on the call. President Zelensky was on the call. I would rate it a 10, you know, very, very friendly. I know the leaders because I was at NATO, as you know. I took it from 2% to 5%, 2% that wasn't paid, 5% that is paid, which is trillions of dollars in defense capability. No, it was always going to be, I was going to meet with President Putin, and then after that, I'm going to call the leaders and President Zelensky.
European leaders urged Donald Trump to press Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire and a meeting with Zelensky when he sits down with the Russian president on Friday. Trump said that he will be talking to Zelensky and European leaders after meeting with Putin. He added that he is open for a trilateral with Zelensky and Putin.
It was always going to be, I was going to meet with President Putin, and then after that, I'm going to call the leaders and President Zelensky. I'm going to call President Zelensky, and then I'll call, probably in that order, the leaders. There's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting, which will be more productive than the first, because the first is I'm going to find out where we are and what we're doing.
Well, Donald Trump made it clear that he does not expect a significant outcome from the first meeting. He said the first meeting will set the tone and the significant outcome can be expected in the second meeting. But he also made it clear that the second meeting won't take place if the first meeting does not go well.
With proposals from Europe on the table and clear red lines drawn between Russia and Ukraine, the common ground between Russia and Ukraine seems far away from the battleground.
And to discuss more, we are now being joined by Dr. John Braxland from Washington, D.C. He's a director at the ANU North America Liaison Office and professor of international security and intelligence studies at Strategic and Defense Studies Center. Thank you so much, Dr. Braxland, for joining us on the broadcast. Let me start off by saying that all eyes are on the Friday Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. What can we realistically expect from this face-to-face?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And you're right, everybody is going to be watching. But I think President Trump has a lot on the line here. Reputationally, he's the one who's invited Putin to the United States, even though there are criminal charges against Putin. He is putting the American reputation on the line, if you like. President Putin is in a position where his troops have just made a bit of a breakthrough in the Donbass, and they are probably in a position where they're thinking, we've got a stronger hand here than we've had for a while, so we don't need to make too many concessions. Of course, conversely, we've seen that Donald Trump has been imposing additional secondary sanctions on India for the purchase of Russian oil, and there's talk of more severe sanctions following. Exactly what that would look like hasn't been articulated, and it's hard to be clear on what would be imposed that wouldn't have negative consequences on the United States as well. Mindful that the other major oil purchaser from Russia is Iran, of course, but also China, and China is in a very strong position in terms of its negotiating position with the United States, and having just been given an extension on the trade deal that they're proposing to reach to avoid or to reduce tariffs. So it's a delicate balance, but Putin has a slight advantage here, and of course Volodymyr Zelensky is deeply concerned about what
Dr. Blackson, let me come
Trump
in there.
might agree to.
Yes, Dr. Blackstone, as you mentioned that Putin has an advantage here. It's Trump who called him here. And, let's just put all these statements aside that it's a listening exercise and 24 hours later there are going to be severe consequences. It's Trump. Those comments will keep coming in. But at this point, the Russians are coming in with a lot of cards in their hands. Does it really mean that the only option here for a peace, for any kind of lasting peace, is for Ukraine to concede land?
No, I don't think that's the case at all. The current tactical advantage that the Russians have achieved near Pokrovsk is one that is a fairly tenuous one. It's one that the Ukrainians probably have the capability to push back, and it is indicative of a seesawing of the battlefield. The incremental advances that Russia has been able to achieve in the last few months have been at a huge expense materially and in terms of people's lives lost and maimed. So the strip of land that's been captured recently through infiltration tactics and adaptation of use of drones in an innovative way has given them some confidence. But as I say, it's a very tenuous hold, and the Russians have not demonstrated the ability to actually master the full spectrum of offensive and then grab and hold, defensive and counterattack tactics and techniques to hold off a counterattack from Ukraine, mindful that this is quite a narrow strip of land, and Ukraine has a big stake in making sure that they get pushed back.
Understood.
Absolutely, Dr. Blackstone, and you've rightly pointed, it is a delicate balance out there, and we know that the EU leaders are urging President Trump to extract a firm commitment from Putin, warning of escalated sanctions if the talks don't go the way they are supposed to. Now, we also know that Putin has repeatedly dangled the carrot of peace only to delay the sanctions which are being threatened. Do you think this time is going to be any different, or are we yet to see some backtracking on Putin's part?
So I don't think there's any substantial evidence that would suggest any change of heart from Vladimir Putin. The industrial complex of Russia has ramped up. They're on a wartime footing. They're playing the long game, and all the internal rhetoric that I'm across and all the external announcements all seem to indicate that Russian resolve remains to try and extinguish Ukrainian freedom, to replace the government in Kiev, and to set up a puppet state. That hasn't changed. The question is, can enough pain be inflicted on Vladimir Putin and his troops to see him change his mind? But there's no evidence of that yet happening. And the question is, how much leverage does Donald Trump have in persuading Putin that it's in his interests to change course? And that's where the sanctions come in and the threat of further actions comes in.
Dr. Blackstone, thanks so much for joining us here on World DNA. Pleasure speaking with you. But as it's clear from Russia's stance, they're already into the fourth year of the war. They seem to be in no hurry to wind this up. So let's see how the talks go come Friday in Alaska. Dr. Blackstone joining us from Washington, D.C.
Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, now the U.S. president is urging his fellow Republicans in Congress to pass a crime bill that would extend the 30-day limit on federal police authority in Washington.
And this he has done while warning that he may declare a national emergency if the lawmakers fail to act.
Well, if it's a national emergency, we can do it without Congress, but we expect to be to Congress before Congress very quickly. And again, we think the Democrats will not do anything to stop crime, but we think the Republicans will do it almost unanimously. So we're going to need a crime bill that we're going to be putting in, and it's going to pertain initially to D.C. We're going to use it as a very positive example, and we're going to be asking for extensions on that, long-term extensions, because you can't have 30 days.
Well, Trump's comments come after National Guard troops began deploying in Washington, D.C. Now, the full contingent of 800 troops is expected to be operational by the end of the week.
We can see a video making the rounds on social media. ICE agents arresting an individual in Washington, D.C. with separate footage revealing an ICE helicopter hovering above the National Mall.
Alongside this, Americans react to Trump's deployment of military and federal forces aimed at curbing violent crimes in Washington.
It seems largely and wholly unnecessary. The actions of a demagogue who seeks to instill a fear in the populace through meaningless executive orders and claims of martial law, when really, as documented by the Department of Justice and by the MPD, the Metropolitan Police Department of DC, crime is at an all-time low in this area in 30 years.
And in a related development, a federal judge finishes hearing arguments on whether military troops deployed this summer by the Trump administration to Los Angeles violated a federal law that bars troops from conducting law enforcement duties within the country.
Well, Judge Charles Breyer will decide whether the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act was violated by the 4,700 California National Guard members and Marines sent following the protest. Now, analysts say that the case could set the precedent for how President Donald Trump can deploy the Guard in the future in California or other states. Now let's shift our focus to West Asia, where the Israeli military has approved a new framework for an expanded ground offensive in the Gaza Strip.
And this is days after the country's security cabinet called for a full capture of the enclave's largest urban center. Now, the IDF says that the campaign will continue until all hostages are freed and Hamas is dismantled. But on the ground, the situation remains dire, with Gaza's civilians paying the highest price.
Well, explosions were heard in Gaza's Tal al-Hawa and Zaytun areas as airstrikes intensified. Hamas called the Israeli assault a scorched earth campaign and accused Israel of deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure and erasing neighborhoods.
Now, according to Gaza Civil Defense Agency, at least 75 Palestinians were killed on Wednesday. The death toll from Israel's offensive now far exceeds 61,000, with the United Nations warning of a humanitarian collapse.
Now, 8 trucks were seen piled up at the Rafah border after being blocked by new Israeli laws and inspections. In a joint letter, over 100 NGOs, including Oxfam and Doctors Without Borders, accused Israel of weaponizing bureaucracy, citing over 60 rejected aid shipments in July alone.
Now, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, over 235 people, including more than 100 children, have died of starvation. Aid workers, however, say that the real number may be far higher. And this week, 31 Palestinian children were flown from Israel to Italy for urgent medical care as part of a humanitarian corridor coordinated by the Italian Air Force.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu continues to face criticism from both inside and outside the country. Former Deputy Chief of Staff of the IDF, Matan Vilai, has said that the Israeli Prime Minister has forgotten about the hostages in this war and needs to remember the reason why this war even began. Vilai added that the real logic behind Netanyahu's decision may not be the well-being of the hostages.
Now we are not sure what are the real considerations of the government. If it's purely the security of Israel, I'm not sure about. If it's purely the existence of the government, which means political issues, maybe this is the real story.
And amid growing uproar over his plan to expand military offensive into Gaza, Netanyahu attended a U.S. Independence Day event in Jerusalem. Along with him was U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee, as well as other Israeli government officials and business executives.
Meanwhile, South Sudan has denied Gaza relocation reports after Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister visited the country for talks. Now, Netanyahu had previously said that he would permit Gazans to emigrate voluntarily and that his government was talking to a number of potential host countries.
A silent protest was held in Tel Aviv to condemn the killing of Al Jazeera journalists days earlier.
I'm here to protest the intentional targeting and assassination of journalists in Gaza, which is unashamedly an attempt to conceal the truth from the rest of the world and from Israel. There are over 240 journalists killed thus far. This week we know of Anas al-Sharif and his team from Al Jazeera.
Anti-government protesters and ruling party supporters in Serbia clashed in northern Serbia after a night of violence that saw masked men hurl missiles and fireworks at campaigners against corruption.
Well, the clash has erupted for a second day on Wednesday in a major escalation after more than 9 months of persistent demonstrations against President Alexander Vučić. Now, cordons of riot police squared off against protesters in Belgrade and used tear gas in an effort to disperse the crowds. At one point, demonstrators threw water bottles at the police after they attempted to make an arrest.
Ova crvena svetlost koju vidite jesu baklje.
Simultaneous protests were held across Serbia on Wednesday, mostly outside local headquarters of Vucic's Serbian Progressive Party, including in the northern city of Novi Sad. Local media reported the two groups threw flares and other objects at each other in Novi Sad, prompting riot police to intervene.
Our Interior Minister Ivica Dacic said at least one policeman was injured in Novi Sad and called for the return of law and order. Serbia's president, other government officials and pro-government media have repeatedly described the protesters as terrorists, though protests in Serbia since November have been largely peaceful.
Vrlo je tenziona atmosfera, lete na sve strane okupljene građane.
Terrible things were done tonight in Novi Sad. They are still doing them, but when you show will and desire to solve things with peace, endurance, and patience, then you always bring victory in the end.
Led by university students, the protesters are demanding that Vucic call an early parliamentary election, which he has refused to do. Protesting students have also called for the ouster of Interior Minister Dacic over recent violence at the demonstrations.
Well, Wednesday's protests were organized in response to incidents on Tuesday evening in the northwestern town of Gaza, where riot police separated protesters from the opposing camps outside the ruling party's offices. The student-led protests in Serbia first started in November after a train station canopy collapsed in Novi Sad, killing 16 people and triggering accusations of corruption in state infrastructure projects.
Protests have since drawn hundreds of thousands of people, shaking Vucic's firm grip on power. His supporters have recently started organizing counter-demonstrations, fueling fears of further violence.
All right, and moving on, the reckless act of Chinese warship chasing a smaller Philippine patrol boat has reignited tensions in the South China Sea.
In the air, Chinese fighters chased Philippine planes. But now the US has entered the fray as well. 2 American warships are deployed in the contested waters. More in this next report. Take a look.
The flashpoint began with a high-speed chase, a tense standoff on the high seas. A Chinese destroyer, a colossal gray behemoth of steel, relentlessly hounded a smaller Philippine Coast Guard vessel, its intentions clear and menacing. This was not a routine patrol, a show of force, an aggressive maneuver, but the hunter became the victim of its own aggression. The Chinese destroyer collided not with its target, but with another Chinese warship. But this wasn't an isolated incident of maritime miscalculation. In the skies above the same disputed shoal, Chinese fighter jets executed intercept maneuvers against Philippine aircraft. The ramifications exploded immediately. Now 2 American warships steamed towards the flashpoint, their presence a stark declaration that Washington will not tolerate Beijing's seaborne bullying campaign. The incident is the latest in a series of confrontations between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea, which Beijing claims almost entirely, despite an international ruling that the assertion has no legal basis. China's militarization of the waters and its expansive territorial claims have inflamed tensions in the region. More than 60% of global maritime trade passes through the disputed waterway. Bureau Report, WION World is one.
And with that, it's time for a very short break.
Don't go anywhere. This is World DNA. Diksha and I will be back with you on the other side when we come back. 2 different benches of India's Supreme Court have passed conflicting rulings on ending the stray dog menace in the country. The Supreme Court has now shifted the suo motu case to a newly constituted 3-judge bench, which will hear the matter on Thursday.
Also on the other side of World DNA, the Communist Party government in Vietnam is promising the country's biggest economic overhaul in decades, a transformation aimed at making the nation Asia's next tiger economy by 2045. All this and more coming up on the other side. Stay tuned, you're watching WION World is One.
India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes, and millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Prime Crime is your front row seat to darkness. To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Welcome back, viewers. Welcome back, viewers. You're watching World DNA with Deeksha and I'm Shivan. Lots more to discuss. Let's start with the headlines.
Three people lost their lives during Independence Day celebrations in Pakistan's Karachi due to reckless aerial firing, while more than 60 others sustained gunshot injuries.
Israeli military says its air defenses successfully intercepted a ballistic missile launched from Yemen, which did not set off warning alerts.
There will be consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
Donald Trump warns of very severe consequences if Vladimir Putin doesn't agree to stop the Ukraine war after Friday's summit. Says he would take a follow-up meeting off the table if he felt Putin was acting in bad faith.
Media reports citing two European officials claim Donald Trump tells European leaders during a call that he does not intend to discuss any possible divisions of territory when he meets with Putin in Alaska.
And we think the Democrats will not do anything to stop crime, but we think the Republicans will do it almost unanimously. So we're going to need a crime bill that we're going to be putting in, and it's going to pertain initially to D.C.
Donald Trump calls on his fellow Republicans in Congress to pass a crime bill extending 30-day limit on federal police control in Washington, adding that he could declare a national emergency if the lawmakers don't act.
Lebanese leaders reject any efforts at foreign interference during a visit by Iran's security chief. PM Aoun says Beirut would tolerate neither tutelage nor diktats after Tehran voiced opposition to plans to disarm Hezbollah.
Jailed Hong Kong media mogul Jimmy Lai's national security trial, which began in late 2023, will enter its final stages today as lawyers present closing arguments. The 77-year-old founder of Apple Daily newspaper is charged with foreign collusion.
Bitcoin hits a new all-time high, soaring past $124,000, driven by a broad surge in risk appetite and a soaring US stock market, marking its latest milestone in a bull run fueled by institutional demand.
NBA approves the sale of Boston Celtics to a group led by private equity mogul Bill Chisholm. The deal values the franchise at more than $6.1 billion, which is the largest for a sports team. Two different benches of India's Supreme Court have passed conflicting rulings on addressing stray dog challenges in the country.
One calls for all stray dogs in the capital to be rounded up and removed with no proper infrastructure to house them yet, and the other insists that stray dogs should be sterilized and returned to their neighborhoods. Now, the Supreme Court has shifted the suo motu case to a newly constituted three-judge bench, which will hear the matter on Thursday. The court noted that the judges who passed the ban order are not part of the new bench. Earlier, A Supreme Court lawyer mentioned that a petition before the court seeking regular sterilization and vaccination of the animals. And to this, the Chief Justice of India said that he would look into the issue of stray dogs in his court. It's not immediately clear if the Chief Justice was referring to the 2024 petition or the recent Supreme Court judgment that has triggered a backlash. The dog dilemma began earlier this week when a bench of the Supreme Court gave an order to relocate all stray dogs in Delhi and surrounding areas.
Well, they are to be sent to safe shelters within 8 weeks. The court took suo motu cognizance of rising reports of dog bites and rabies cases in the country. Now, the judges said, forget the rules and focus on public safety, even if it meant hurting the sentiments of animal lovers. But this decision contradicts the Supreme Court's 2024 order. That order says that authorities are to follow the country's animal birth control rules, which say that stray dogs are to be caught, sterilized, vaccinated, and then released back to their localities. The early ruling also underlined compassion towards animals as a constitutional value.
Integrated health platforms say over 10,000 people get bitten by dogs every day in India, but the actual number may be different. If you just look at the numbers of rabies deaths, the figures are startling. The government figures for rabies deaths in 2022 is just 21, but WHO, using government data and other Indian sources, says 305 died of rabies in the same year. WHO also says that its estimate of rabies deaths in India for 2022 may be much higher.
Now, Maharashtra state in India records the highest number of dog bite cases in the country, followed by Tamil Nadu with 12.9 lakhs, Gujarat at 8.4 lakhs, Karnataka 7.6 lakhs and Andhra Pradesh at 6.5 lakhs.
Now, this conflicted order has divided residents and animal lovers. The residents' welfare associations have welcomed the dog-free neighborhood plan, while animal lovers or activists say that it is impractical. They pointed at shelters as overcrowded and being underfunded and not enough to house all the stray animals in Delhi. Nigeria's Air Force says it has killed nearly 600 armed militia members in the past 8 months.
Well, as part of an intensified campaign against insurgents in the country's northeast, but analysts caution that the reality on the ground tells a more complex story. The Air Force chief says that 592 fighters were killed, over 200 technical vehicles destroyed and 166 logistics hubs were dismantled in Borno state since the start of this year. Terrorists from Boko Haram and its Islamic State West Africa province splinter group have long plagued the region, killing thousands and displacing communities. Well, Air Chief says that air wars is now faster, sharper and more surgical, targeting high-value leaders and crippling supply chains.
The offensive includes coordinated day and night strikes using A-29 Super Tucano aircraft, Mi-171 helicopters, and they even use enhanced surveillance platforms. But security analysts say the claimed gains are hard to verify, with Boko Haram factions still carrying out deadly attacks under Operation Hadin Kai. Nigeria's Air Force has flown nearly 800 combat sorties this year, while in the northwest, a joint air and ground raid recently killed scores of armed gang members in Zamfara state.
And for more on this, our correspondent Louisa Olani has sent us this report. Take a look.
In a major blow to terrorism, the Nigerian Air Force said it has neutralized 592 terrorists and destroyed over 300 enemy assets in 8 months. Under Operation Hadin Kai, its airstrikes have destroyed terrorist hubs across Borno from Gonori to Damboa. Among the team's biggest wins is a crippling of 206 technical vehicles and 166 logistics hubs, severely limiting terrorist mobility. We recall a few days ago that the military said it killed scores of armed gang members in a joint air and ground operation in Zamfara State, northwest Nigeria, after more than 400 of them were seen preparing to attack a village. Despite challenges like rugged terrain and adapting to insurgent tactics, the NAF's precision strikes have surpassed 2024's operational gains. Now, with new gunships acquired to keep the fight going, citizens hope that this series of strikes decimates the terrorists totally. From Lagos, Nigeria, Louisa Olani, WION World is One.
And the Communist Party government in Vietnam is promising the country's biggest economic overhaul in decades.
Now, it's a transformation which is aimed at making the nation Asia's next tiger economy by 2045. The ambitious announcement comes as the country battles climate risks, an aging population and global trade pressures. The Communist Party chief Tulam announced what he called a new era of development to escape the middle-income trap and replicate the success of early tiger economies like South Korea and Taiwan.
Now, over 3 decades, Vietnam has transformed into a global manufacturing hub, lifting millions from poverty. But the low-cost, export-led boom is now slowing. Tariffs from the United States are forcing the country to rethink its dependence on cheap manufacturing.
Vietnam is going to grow old very, very quickly in the next couple of decades, and the demographic dividend of Vietnam is coming to an end. So if only depends on the labor-intensive industries in garments or in textile, there's no way for Vietnam to escape the middle-income trap, like many other fellow Southeast Asians also facing with.
Now, the government is pushing into high-tech sectors like computer chips, artificial intelligence and renewable energy. The government is rolling out massive infrastructure projects. It also plans to turn Ho Chi Minh City and Da Nang into global financial centers with tax breaks, simplified business rules and a startup-friendly environment.
But there are major challenges on the way. Political resistance to reforms, a rapidly aging population and the growing impact of climate change. The World Bank has warned that Vietnam could lose up to 14.5% of GDP annually by 2050.
And wildfires are raging across southern Europe as heatwave fuels destruction. Uncontrolled blaze is forcing thousands to flee.
And as temperatures push above 40 degrees Celsius, authorities now are running out of time, struggling to contain the fire, save lives and also a burning continent. Take a look at this report.
Thick clouds of smoke and flame. Firefighters on the run, resources stretched thin. As multiple wildfires rage across Europe. This comes after weeks of scorching heat waves and temperature spikes across Mediterranean Europe. Red heat alerts have been issued in parts of Italy, France, Spain, Portugal and the Balkans, warning of significant risks to health. Most regions in central and southern France are under close monitoring by the fire department, amid high risk of forest fires.
It's harder and harder to bear whether you are at home or outside. It's really unbearable. The heat is becoming really suffocating, particularly when you feel like you can't get air. And well, we do what we can, it's not going to improve.
Across other parts of southern Europe, wildfires intensified on Wednesday after a night-long battle to protect the perimeter of Greece's third largest city. Raging flames in western Greece prompted the evacuation of at least 25 settlements as fires persisted throughout the country. People watched in despair and anger as inferno swallowed their livelihoods.
What does it look like? It looks like doomsday. We came from Athens with our volunteer association, Cleisthenes. We can't do anything more. May God help us and help the people here.
Water planes and helicopters joined forces as mass evacuations remain underway across Greece. Blazes are continuing to destroy homes, businesses and properties. Spain too remains under the grip. More than 5,000 people have been evacuated. In the north central Castile and Leon region, Spain's largest, the government has raised its national emergency response level, preparing additional support for multiple evacuations and highway closures. As a heat wave is expected to reach 44 degrees Celsius in some areas. Turkey is also battling severe wildfires since late June. The situation is no different as orange hues streak across the sky and deadly inferno wreaks havoc. Hundreds have been evacuated and the country has brought several major fires under control, with monthly records being broken every month this year. Europe sears through another seasonal heat wave. According to the UK-based Carbon Brief, 2025 is predicted to be the second or third warmest year on record. The extreme heat in Europe shows one thing: the continent is heating far faster than the rest of the world. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Bitcoin is back in the headlines, soaring to yet another all-time high.
Now, the latest price milestone comes as companies and institutional players ramp up their exposure to the world's largest cryptocurrency. Bitcoin topped a new all-time high of $124,000 on Thursday, driven by growing expectations of US Federal Reserve interest rate cuts and renewed corporate appetite for digital assets. Simultaneously, Ether climbed to $4,780, reaching levels not seen since 2021. The broader rally is being fueled by a bullish macro environment. Anticipation of Fed rate cuts in September is lifting risk asset appetite, and regulatory momentum is strong. An executive order now permits crypto assets, including Bitcoin, to be part of the 401k retirement plans.
Well, institutional and corporate demand remains the other major fuel. BlackRock's iShares Bitcoin Trust is one of the largest ETF inflows. Meanwhile, companies like MicroStrategy and Blocking continue adding Bitcoin to their balance sheets, cementing the asset's role in treasury strategies.
The total crypto market cap has ballooned, exceeding $4.18 trillion, up from approximately $2.5 trillion in late 2024. Analysts are eyeing the next threshold now, with forecasts suggesting that Bitcoin could rally further towards $150,000 if bullish momentum and policy tailwinds persist.
Meanwhile, broader markets are also riding the wave. The US dollar weakened, hovering near multi-week lows as rate cut probabilities soared.
And Wall Street's rally rolls on, with the S&P 500 and Nasdaq closing at fresh record highs for a second straight day.
Well, optimism is growing over a potential Fed rate cut, even as concerns over inflation and political swirl around the central bank leadership. Look at this next report for more details.
U.S. stocks ended higher on Wednesday, with the Dow adding 1%, the S&P 500 gaining about 1/3%, and the Nasdaq ticking up marginally. It was the second straight day of record closing highs for the S&P 500 and Nasdaq. It's an upward momentum that has baffled some investors, says Alexander Morris, CEO and Chief Investment Officer at FM Investments.
There's a lot of things to be worried about, but it seems pure demand and greed keeps driving equity markets higher and higher. Investors are no doubt watching inflation that is, although a little cooler than expected, still stubbornly above the Fed's metric, a impugning of the independence of the Federal Reserve from the executive branch that seems to have been joined by the legislative branch now, a plethora of names being mentioned for Jerome Powell's new job and the opening seat on the Federal Reserve Board, all of which are leading to politically driven policy as opposed to sound monetary policy.
Stocks on Wednesday were buoyed by increasing confidence that the Federal Reserve was getting closer to cutting interest rates. Traders are now fully pricing in a 25 basis point cut at the Fed's September policy meeting, according to the CME's FedWatch tool. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said on Wednesday that he thought an aggressive half-point cut was possible given recent weak employment numbers. Stocks on the move Wednesday included Apple, which rose more than 1.5% after Bloomberg News reported the company is plotting expansion into AI-powered robots, home security, and smart displays. AI data center operator CoreWeave, which is backed by NVIDIA, fell almost 21% after the company reported a bigger-than-expected quarterly net loss. And shares of Paramount Skydance jumped more than 36% as the company won exclusive broadcasting rights to the Ultimate Fighting Championship for 7 years.
Let's shift our focus to the world of sports, where PSG have denied Thomas Frank a dream start at Tottenham Hotspur.
And the French champions were down by 2 goals with just 5 minutes to go, but made an incredible comeback to beat the Spurs on penalties and win the UEFA Super Cup for their 5th title of 20.
Starring Martin Short and Selena Gomez.
Now, the latter television show has been nominated many times from 2022 to date for a Primetime Emmy. However, it was back in 1969 that Martin shared the Emmy for Outstanding Writing Achievement in Comedy. Variety or music for the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. Martin has won several Lifetime Achievement Awards, including an honorary Academy Award in 2014.
Now, the banjo-playing musician is also a multi-award-winning Grammy artist, including scooping the top music accolade for Best American Roots Song for Love Has Come For You, as well as screen and music success. Martin is a published author. His novella Shopgirl in 2000 was adapted into a 2005 rom-com of the same name, co-starring Martin, Claire Danes and Jason Schwartzman.
Martin was married to British actor Victoria Tennant from 1986 to 1994. He later wed writer Anne Stringfield, whom he has been with for nearly 2 decades and who co-penned 2 earlier episodes of Only Murders in the Building.
I always feel, I think George Lucas said, movies are binary, they either work or they don't.
Denzel Washington, A$AP Rocky and Jeffrey Wright were among the stars that walked the red carpet for the new Spike Lee film, Highest to Lowest in Brooklyn.
And more about it in this next report. Take a look.
Entertainment is just a byproduct of art. The true nature of what we do is gather together where we collectively think of who we are, who we want to be, who we hope to become, where we failed, where we've triumphed.
The right time is that Denzel sent me the script and said, "You want to do it?" And so he called me at the right time. This project was brought to me by Mr. Denzel Washington.